And former President Trump announcing a class action lawsuit against big tech giants, Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And Trump was deplatformed and censored by big tech in the wake of the January 6th Capitol protest. Here he is at a press conference in Bedminster, New Jersey earlier today.
Today, in conjunction with the America First Policy Institute, I'm filing as the lead class representative a major class action lawsuit against the big tech giants, including Facebook, Google, and Twitter, as well as their CEOs, Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, and Jack Dorsey. Three real nice guys.
And joining us now to discuss is distinguished university professor at Touro College, Thane Rosenbaum. Thanks for joining us today. Does he have a case?
Well, remember, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which has been on everyone's mind for the last 2 years, provides immunity for internet providers, carriers, that goes back to 1996, and this immunity extends to civil liability, and that's what this case is about. The question is, can the president overcome Section 230? He tried to issue an executive order when he was president, which has now since been overturned in his own executive order by President Biden. But this is, in many ways, two issues. There's a First Amendment issue, and there's an antitrust issue, right? You've got digital platforms with extraordinary, highly concentrated ownership of a public forum. Remember, government owns the public square, but the government doesn't own Facebook. But Facebook is acting like the public square, and as well as Twitter. And so therefore, perhaps even though they're not government entities, they should be treated like surrogate government entities, because they're the ones that are creating the platform in exchange for an era in which people used to go to public parks, town halls, and village greens. Now they go to their phones on social media. This is how people learn about information, and this is how the political ideas of the day are debated. And so therefore, maybe either Congress should act or maybe a court will act in this case.
And then we're going to get lawsuits regardless. And it sounded like one of the primary lawyers for his team who spoke today sounded like he wanted this and expected that it might end up at the Supreme Court. Do you think that's part of why they're going with this? Because they feel like they might have the votes that would rule on their side?
Well, remember, Bob, in Congress, the congressional leaders are pro-high big tech. They're very supportive of Google and Facebook. It's not so much Republicans, but definitely Democrats. So I'm not sure congressional action will work here to overturn 230 through legislation. But you're right. A court could take a look at Google and Facebook and say, are you kidding? You're all monopolies. No one can compete. Nobody can compete with you, right? I mean, there's no other, even Donald Trump, who was supposed to announce his own social media platform over July 4th, didn't. So maybe he's realizing it's really super hard to do. And this is the best way to do it, that they are engaged in anti-competitive behavior simply because of the scale of their size. And also remember, they got this immunity, Bob, in the mid-90s because this was 10 years before Facebook, right. 12, 13 years before Twitter. No one knew about this at the time. The idea then was that all they were doing was building the super information highway, the bricks and mortar of the internet. Nobody understood that they would, and they got an immunity because no one thought that they would be producing content or making decisions, viewpoint discrimination on content. Now we see they're censors. They function like government censors. They decide what political viewpoints they accept.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at this and just their gut feel is that something's wrong.
Yeah, but even both sides, researching, both, Democrats and Republicans, get a little upset over certain things that they're censoring. Thane, I want to get your take on what former President Trump said, speaking about censorship and shadow banning. Take a listen.
We're asking the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida to order an immediate halt to social media companies' illegal, shameful censorship of the American people, and that's exactly what they are doing. We're demanding an end to the shadow banning a stop to the silencing and a stop to the blacklisting, banishing, and canceling that you know so well.
Thane, it wasn't just President Trump who was censored. He had a woman speak she was censored. She put out something on Facebook about her daughter and wearing masks in school. She was censored. So it's not just politicians who are censored, as he was mentioning.
Allison, if you question the 2020 election, you'll find yourself in violation of Facebook's community standards. And you're saying, what, in America, that you can't question the election? So the president is right. Remember, he is a victim of this in his own way. He's been booted off from all of them for 2 years. And it is strange to think that you can see world leaders like, the president of Iran or the Ayatollahs of Iran who talk about wiping, say, Israel off the map, that doesn't violate any community standards, right?
Yeah.
Any criticism of Black Lives Matter today would violate community standards. So what we're seeing is they're not functioning according to the interest of news interests. As if we're here, we are completely unbiased. We just want to provide this platform for people to provide information and news. Look, remember, people are using social media now for news and public forum.
Right.
And so to be kicked off of it, to be prevented of it, is a significant diminishment of somebody's free speech rights.
Yeah.
The problem is it's not a government, it's a private entity. So the question is, should a private entity have so much concentrated power over all of us, including a former president?
And I think a lot of people just have a gut feel that there's something wrong about that power residing in like 2 or 3 hands. Last week, there was a federal judge which dismissed a lawsuit against Facebook, an antitrust suit against Facebook by 46 states and the U.S. government for being an antitrust, essentially saying they're a monopoly. It was tossed out by a judge. Why would this work if that didn't work?
Well, again, right now, this doesn't appear to be an antitrust lawsuit. I haven't seen it, but right now, this appears to be a First Amendment lawsuit, right? So it's a little different. We're going in another direction. I'm not saying this can't eventually also become or be a competing lawsuit that has antitrust dimensions, because I think you're right, Bob. That's where people think it doesn't look right. That, what do you mean? These guys are the only game in town.
Yeah, like two people in Silicon Valley are deciding that the president of the United States shouldn't have a voice on here. Right or wrong, it just, a lot of people have a gut feel it doesn't seem right.
And Bob, those two people have really strong opinions.
Yes.
Right? Meaning they're not neutral. They're not calling balls and strikes. They want to just call strikes. So the question there is, why would a court do this? Look, antitrust cases are difficult to win, number one. Number two, that doesn't mean that there won't be another aspect of this coming down, that we might see other antitrust lawsuits, as well as discussions in Congress about potential legislative measures that address this. Yeah. So right now, we're really, really, really limited to the possibility of how can you make Facebook and the other social media companies look like government censors. Yeah. That's what this lawsuit's battle, because otherwise they are protected under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
But if they're in the public square and they're controlling conversation in the public square, you might have an argument. I know that from listening to you, Thane.
We learned it all from you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Bob, but I've learned everything about baseball from you.
Well, there's plenty more to learn, I'm sure. Thane Rosenbaum, thank you so much, sir. The latest out of Surfside, Florida, following the condo collapse there, including the tropical storm impeding rescue efforts. We've been following that, if you've seen in the lower right-hand part of your TV screen. We've been following Elsa up